Good evening, everybody, and happy holidays. Welcome to a very special Monday night edition of IncrediChat, brought to you by IncrediCon, Hudson Valley's family-friendly comic and pop culture festival here in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York. I'm Mike, as always. Look, we're decked out for the hall. We're decked the halls out for the holidays. Here we are in my little basement studio, if you will, right? But tonight we got a great guest. We're welcoming him back to the show. We're going to talk about we talked about some Christmas specials with Lance Falk before. Tonight we're going to talk with the guru who knows so much about all the wonderful films that we know and love every year. Please welcome to tonight's show once again, the great Rick Goldschmidt. Welcome, Rick. Welcome.
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And look, you're all decked out. You got all those great collectibles and merch and everything out there too. Welcome back. It's good to have you with us once more.
Thanks.
So, I mean, last year we talked a little bit about, I guess, the origins of some of these Rankin Bass shows. And I want to talk to you about the longevity of the company tonight, and just where it went to. I know we previously spoke about the puppets and where some of the puppets are. I know you shared that there's some overseas in Asia still. There's so many of those around. And which ones did you say you owned? I know you had a couple of them, right?
I had a few from the first Christmas. Angela Lansbury was the star. It was a 1975 special. And I had Sister Teresa, who Angela Lansbury voiced. And I also had Octavia, that Hillary Momberger voiced. Hillary was the voice of Sally in the Peanuts specials in the early 70s. So she was actually supposed to come to an event that I had the puppet at, but she couldn't make it on the West Coast.
And now she wasn't she didn't do Great Pumpkin or the
No, she was in the Thanksgiving special.
Thanksgiving one.
And a couple around that era.
Got you. I mean, and they made so many of those things too.
Right.
So let's get into Rankin Bass, and I guess we'll just quickly recap. Joe Ryan's watching the Saragine. Mel Blank 222 says, "Hey Rick, hello Mel Blank. It's not the legendary Mel Blank, but you got a cool name there."
Yeah,
so I mean, I guess just for people who don't know who you are, just let's go over. How did you become the historian quickly for Rankin Bass again and make these connections? I know you knew both of them as well.
Right. Well, it was out of college, and my degree's in illustration, and I was interested in the work of Jack Davis and Paul Coker Jr. out of Mad Magazine. And Jack Davis was a prolific commercial artist. And I really started emulating his work, and I realized he was in the credits for Mad Monster Party. I said, "What happened to Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass?" And he said he was still doing an occasional job for them. And he told me to get a hold of Paul and get Arthur's phone number, which I did. And I just told Arthur I want to do a book, even though I had no aspirations to write a book at all. And he was like, "Send me 2 chapters." So I sent them 2 chapters, and he liked them. And then he just trusted me from there on out. And he flew out to my home when I had the whole first book done. And we went over everything, and we really hit it off. His degree is in art too. And he not only was he a commercial artist, but he was the art director at ABC television in the 50s.
Gotcha.
So we really understood what good art was, and we were both driven to get things done. That's the difference between me and a lot of people. I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. And
Gotcha.
So is Arthur. So that was what he appreciated about me, and that's what I appreciated about their work.
Gotcha. So now, I mean, like you mentioned, he worked over at ABC TV, and I mean, I'm gonna guess, because I got it pulled up here too. like one of the first things they did, the television special, was Return to Oz in '64. Then came Rudolph, and I mean, probably when they first did Rudolph, they never expected their films to, well, I mean, even their company to take off to be like what people relate to Christmas, right?
Right. It was just sort of a beginning for them. They didn't think it would be on the air for more than a few years. So that's why they made all the changes in the second year, just to satisfy Willard Saloff at GE. They didn't really think that it would be on television for eternity and that it would be the thing that they'd be remembered for. They really wanted to get into live action movies, and that was their goal. But they never quite did that. They did a bunch of movies for ABC Friday Night Movie.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of cult classics. And, they did feature films like The Last Unicorn, which was pretty highly acclaimed. And they did Marco and King Kong Escapes, but never quite got to the Gone with the Wind.
No.
Status that they wanted to get to.
So let me ask now. So again, you got to know these guys, and like their career was pretty, but there was a bit of diversity in the beginning of it, right? And then Rudolph hit, Frosty, Little Drummer Boy, Santa Claus is coming to town, and then they realized, hey, we're on to something. When they like, from what you know, from when they hit that note and they realized that Christmas was their marker, when they realized, especially Rudolph and Frosty, were not going anywhere. Were they the ones that were pitching to the networks, like, I'm a big Hanna-Barbera fan, and Joe Barbera was infamous to constantly going in and pitching all these great ideas. I don't even know if great ideas for some of them, right? But Joe Barbera would pitch all these crazy ideas to the networks. Were Rankin Bass pitching the ideas to the network, or were the networks coming to them saying like, hey, give us the next Frosty, give us the next Rudolph?
Well, they were pretty driven in the fact that Arthur Rankin was the one going into the network saying we could do this. And they would say, okay, and give them a deadline right away. I'm writing an article for Retro Fan magazine on the Little Drummer Boy for next year. And I just interviewed Teddy Eccles. And I told Teddy, did you know the Little Drummer Boy, once Arthur sold it, and I think he sold it on a Friday, he had to have the script in by Monday.
Oh my God.
Called Romeo Muller up on the phone and had him tell the story over the phone to Arthur's secretary to get a script in by Monday, because things back then were less technical like they are today.
Yeah.
And Romeo was a genius, so they had that going for them. And basically Arthur was the drive behind Rankin Bass. He would go into a network and say, we want to do a story on the year without a Santa Claus, and we have this Pulitzer Prize winning book, and we have Romeo Muller who can write it. And they would say, okay, well, here's the money, and we need it by November, and he would get it done, by hook or crook. So
yeah.
They were very similar. Now, I had meetings with Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera, and they were very aware of Rankin Bass, not in a competitive way, but just the fact that they were very successful in the same medium.
Yeah.
And they appreciated their work, too. So you learn a lot being the historian for Rankin Bass. I'm still learning about them today.
And you mentioned Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera. I mean, listen, in the 70s, around the same time period, Hanna-Barbera were no slouches rolling out Christmas shows too. They're like, oh, we got the Flintstones, we got Yogi Bear. Let's just do all these shows with them, all these Christmas specials with them, which, I mean, made sense at the time.
Right, exactly. You know, it's funny though, how Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass became the kings of Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's so weird that only a few other specials, like A Charlie Brown Christmas and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, have survived the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
And in those two cases, they really don't feature the iconic characters of Christmas like the Rankin Bass specials do. You know, Santa Claus and Frosty and all the characters that we really associate with Christmas. So it's strange that nobody else has been able to do what Rankin Bass did after all these years. They can't even copy him. There's been attempts to remake Rudolph and do things with Frosty, and they've been horrible. Just awful.
But like you're talking about, because I have the DVDs, Rudolph and the Island of Misfit Toys, and then the Legend of Frosty the Snowman, and then that guy. I don't know that guy. And I apologize to anybody who's watching who's a fan, but I don't know why CBS does it this way. But it's like Jimmy Durante, Frosty, followed, and I love John Goodman and Jonathan Winters, but Frosty Returns is just not that good. Like, why?
Frosty Returns is pretty bad, and I think Bill Melendez studio produced it in his later days. And when Arthur Rankin came to my house and we asked him about Frosty Returns, he didn't want to comment on it. He just said it's like taking gloves off a Mickey Mouse. It doesn't make any sense. He wouldn't criticize it, but I know he didn't like it.
Well, I mean, going back to what they were doing, like Rankin Bass, you know, they made the perfect Frosty Return. Frosty's Winter Wonderland is a perfect sequel to Frosty. Right. I mean, are there flaws to it? Of course there are. But I mean, other than that, like it's a good sequel. That should be what's airing after the classic Frosty.
Yeah, you're right about that. The thing about it is, and this is something that's kind of interesting that a lot of people don't really realize. The reason that the sequels didn't look the same or didn't have all the same characters, like in the case of Frosty's Winter Wonderland, it didn't have Professor Hinkle and Hocus Pocus and Karen because it was on ABC, not CBS. ABC ordered Frosty's Winter Wonderland, so they couldn't use the same characters that were appearing on CBS every year. You know, the annual airings were still going, so they had to come up with something a little bit different that really wasn't an actual sequel because it didn't have the same cast of characters.
Interesting.
But nowadays, it should air right after Frosty, but CBS has their deal with Classic Media. So Classic Media offered them Frosty Returns, and they just went with that.
And Warner's owns the other one.
Right. Warner Brothers would have to, sign off on some kind of deal with them. But the thing about it is these corporations, these big companies, they're not real bright. They don't know what they own. They don't know how to market them. They don't know how to do anything. That's why they need someone like me to tell them. And eventually, I think it's all going to be under one umbrella. In fact, through a company that I'm working with now called Super 7, they're actually coordinating all of this right now.
Let me just ask, you mentioned Super 7. Are they making some cool, badass, pardon the badass Christmas language, but are they making some cool action figures? I bet.
They're going to.
Oh, wow.
They've already done Thundercats and Silverhawks. And we're moving into the enchanted world of Rankin Bass. So my goal is for all of the other great specials, like Was the Night Before Christmas.
I love that one. Oh my God.
The Long-Haired Donkey, Jack Frost, even The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which was their last. There are subgroups of fans of those specials.
Absolutely.
And to this date, there really hasn't been any official merchandise. There's been a lot of bootleg stuff that I've been monitoring, all over Etsy and T Public and all these companies.
Yeah.
I've gotten some of them down, but there's a lot of bootleg stuff, but there's no like really quality action figures or anything like that. So that's where we're headed.
Nice. No, I mean, I definitely want to have the Mouse family for, I don't have them under my Christmas tree. That'd be fantastic.
Right, right.
So let me ask you a question. You're talking about like this ABC CBS thing, right? So
Yeah.
I just want to go back to that. So CBS obviously had classic Frosty, and I mean, I'm gonna guess probably the same thing with Rudolph and Rudolph Shiny New Year too. Probably
Right.
a similar thing because that's Warner Bros. Has that one too. So like CBS was cool with like, okay, we're gonna do this, and ABC was like, yeah, we're gonna pretty much do our own Frosty, our own Rudolph, and we're still gonna have Billy Richards. We're still gonna have Jackie Vernon, and nobody. Do you know what I'm saying? Like CBS is okay with them even using the voice talent in those regards.
Yeah, I think that was where Arthur would come in, and he had a personal relationship. In the case of ABC, it was with Michael Eisner,
Gotcha.
who eventually took over Disney. So with Michael Eisner, he might have been like, you know what, we got this on CBS, but we can still do it on ABC with the main character and just add all these other characters. Are you okay with that? Sure. You know, things weren't as Sue happy back then.
Yeah.
So it was easier to negotiate a deal than it was today. In the later days of Rankin Bass, after my first two books came out, I wanted to do a special with Andy Williams and the Osmond, because the Osmonds were featured in a Rankin Bass show.
Yeah.
That Donnie was very fond of. Donnie Osmond loved Rankin Bass. He said that boosted their career like you couldn't believe. It was like the Beatles having their cartoon show or their Ed Sullivan appearances. It made a bigger difference in their record sales and everything. So I wanted to do a classic Rankin Bass special, and Andy Williams was up for it. Paul Coker did the designs for me. I put them in my book, the 20th anniversary of the Enchanted World of Rankin Bass. But at this time, whenever Arthur and his co-producer, Peter Battalion, would go to a network like Fox, they got Santa Baby on Fox. They weren't looking for the classic, heartwarming, wonderful specials of Rankin Bass in the early 90s.
It was like the new kind of.
They were looking for like a Ren and Stimpy type, you know,
Gotcha.
thing. So they couldn't sell it, even though they did talk to networks about doing a classic Rankin Bass special. They couldn't sell it. And it wasn't like it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where Arthur would just say, we'll do something on the Little Drummer Boy, or we'll do something on Peter Cottontail. They were all in on that. So it was difficult.
Now, again, you know, you're mentioning these pitching of these sequels. And again, the 70s, you had Frosty and the Rudolph sequels, and then they did the feature film, which that never made it to the theaters, or did it make it to the theaters? Or
it went in the theaters in the summer, which was a bad idea, Arthur always said, because you know it's Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July. So for some reason, Avco, which was somewhat related to Joseph E. Levine still, I think, from the Mad Monster Party, Daydreamer, and Mother Goose, when they put it in the theaters, it didn't do well at all. So they recut it into a television special. I think even the same year they got it on ABC as a 90-minute television special. And it did better on television than it did in the theater.
Because it seems like a lot, and I mean, so many of these shows get like lost, you know, like people completely forgot that these even exist. Like you tell somebody there is a special of like Rudolph and Frosty together, people are like, no. And yeah, it exists. There's a lot of people that don't believe it.
Right. When I did my first book, I had to round everything up.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that I was surprised existed, like the Daydreamer and Willie McBean and his Magic Machine. I mean, Willie McBean was shot simultaneously with Rudolph.
Was it really?
It has all the same voice actors, the same exact look. It was their first feature film. So you would think that that would have been a huge success, but it wasn't. And it got lost over, decades of.
Interesting.
It's still not out in a good way, but it's amazing how much work they did. When you look at their body of work, it's incredible, and most of it was good. most of it was successful in at least an artistic way. Some of it wasn't financially, but artistically it was.
Yeah. Now I want to go back. You mentioned voice actors too. And I always heard the stories, and I saw you post it this year. Let's talk about the original voice of Karen, because the legendary June Foray was the voice of Karen, and I know up on your Instagram page you have it, and I guess Suzanne Davidson, the young lady. What was the story behind that, and were they kind of forced into doing that change, or?
Well, nobody remembered the change. Nobody. Arthur, Don Duga, Maury Laws, nobody did. And June Foray and I had a very, very good friendship. For years, I was mailing her stuff that she asked me for, and she did all kinds of voicemail messages for me.
Nice.
And I went to her house when one of my first trips out to California, and spent time over there looking at her collection and everything. So I knew her really, really well. In fact, she would go around Hollywood and tell people about me. And I got a phone call from Phil Kay, who was one of the sound engineers on all the specials. And I got to interview him a little bit. So nobody remembered any change to Frosty. And I didn't have any of the original networks on Frosty. So I had to kind of figure it out myself, which I did last year. Gotcha. Suzanne Davidson is the same age as me.
I'm just gonna hold up here, so there she is.
Right. So in 1969, she was too little to do any voice work like that. It wasn't until 1973 that she starred in that television remake of Miracle on 34th Street. Well, that was on CBS. And their budget for that was huge. I found out later. It wasn't just your average television remake. They were going to get Natalie Wood to do the mother.
Oh, wow. And
have her real daughter play the daughter that Suzanne Davidson ended up playing.
Gotcha.
So there was this large budget for that television special, and they really wanted to emphasize that special and everything surrounding it. So I think some CBS executive just figured, let's get Suzanne also to redo the Frosty voice, because I don't really like the Frosty voice on there. Oh, Ruth Gray had a very specific voice for children, and you could tell it was Rocky the Flying Squirrel, or some of the other characters that she did.
Yeah,
you could tell it was her as Karen, and they didn't necessarily like that. And then Peanuts placed an emphasis on getting real kids.
Gotcha.
Originally, I was friends with Dick Beals, who was the voice of Speedy Alka-Seltzer, and originally the story goes that Charles Schultz liked Dick Beals' voice for Charlie, but he didn't know he was an adult. So when he found that out later, he decided, no, we don't want to use Dick Beals. We want to use real kids. And then later they got Dick Beals to direct the real kids in the Peanuts.
Did not know that. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I think it was just that some executive at CBS decided, we got this special coming up. We got this little girl here. Let's redo the Frosty voice and just get it on the air in '73. And Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass, if they were even asked about it, they would have said, okay, fine, because they were making money from a special that was airing year after year that they didn't have to do anything with anymore. So they didn't care. You know, they were still going to get their money. Yeah. So that's how it happened. And I thought it wasn't true because nobody at Rankin Bass could confirm it. But I know it's true because, you know, that's the only way it could have been done. And it was done in '73 when that Miracle on 34th Street aired.
Well, no, because let me ask too. Is there, and I was after I saw it, I'm like digging online. Is there any audio that still exists of June as Karen, like from those original airings? I mean, there has to be tape.
She's on the MGM album,
which is.
I co-produced the soundtrack CD for Warner Brothers and Rhino in the early 2000s, and June is Karen on the MGM record,
and that's with Billy DeWolf and Jackie Vernon. They're all on there too. Then
right.
Wow.
So you can hear her whole performance on the album. In fact, you could take the record and match it up with with the picture. And you know, it's good. There wouldn't be any reason that I would say, oh, this is terrible, it's got to be changed.
Yeah.
It was just a preference by someone at CBS to go ahead and change it. Suzanne Davidson sounds great. You know, she was a little girl. Yeah.
And I mean, again, like that's the legendary thing. And I know you and I were messaging earlier because you posted out, and I asked you, I was like, "Have you ever found this?" And she's like, "Just out in the world, someplace. Who knows where this woman is?"
Right. Well, she was in she became a soap opera actress.
Okay.
She was in Tales of Tomorrow. I forget what the name of the title of the show was. It was a big one though back then. Mm-hmm. So people know her from that.
Gotcha.
You know? And in fact, they even commented on my post with that picture of her. Oh yeah, I know her from One Life to Live or whatever it was. So then she got out of that and went into real estate or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I saw something online, but I haven't been able to find her on any social media or anything like that.
Interesting. And I mean, and just to think, like this woman, right now, this grown woman who, you know, really, I guess, is out of the public eye. You know, she's
an iconic television special that's been on CBS. It's the longest running special on the same network. You know, Rudolph changed from NBC to
Hey. Rick, we have Johnny Quest playing on here.
I was getting from
I'm like, where's Johnny Quest coming from? Johnny Quest Christmas? No.
No, that's from my mom. Speaking of the voice actors, we lost Paul Soles and Alfie Scott this year.
Who was the other one?
Alfie Scott. He was like 101.
Wow.
And he did the voice of Charlie in the Box. And he was also in Return to Oz too. So Paul Soles,
yes,
most notably Hermey the Elf, he was also in the Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad show. He was in Festival of Family Classics. He did a lot of work for Rankin Bass, but he was a little bit felt like he was taken advantage of with Rudolph.
Gotcha.
So when I became really good friends with Billy Mae Richards, she was like, Paul's in Stratford, but when he gets back, I'm going to ask him to sign stuff for you and this and that.
Yeah.
But he never wanted to, because he felt like I was really close with Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he resented them because of Rudolph, but Rudolph wasn't their doing as far as the longevity goes. Nobody could foresee that. So the actors only got paid like $5,000 or $6,000, something like that, for the first two airings, and that was it. We didn't get any residuals, but nobody could foresee what it was going to become.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and you know, and I met him at a comic convention. Gosh, some years ago, not far from where I live, in Connecticut. So, and he was a nice guy. I have my little Hermey picture signed by him, which is really fun. And yeah, no, it's cool.
And I love him as Spider-Man.
Yes.
I have autographs all over my home of Spider-Man and Hermey.
And he was also in the Incredible Hulk movie too.
Right.
The new one. Well, I won't say the new one. The Ed Norton movie he was in.
Right.
I want to ask you now too. So you know the Frosty movie, well the Frosty and Rudolph film, the two specials. After those, because I mean Rudolph and Frosty, cash cows, right, if you will. What was there ever talk to do more Frosty and Rudolph, or like did they want to kind of move away from that going forward? Because I mean, we did Twas the Night Before Christmas, Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, completely different from what they've traditionally done with Santa before. No Mickey Rooney there, you know. Right. Did they want to continue with other iterations or continuations of those characters at any point?
No, like I said in earlier on, their aspirations were to make feature films. And you can see that in the 70s when they changed course and all of a sudden they were doing The Hobbit and Return of the King, which is totally different fantasy genre. And The Last Unicorn too, and Flight of Dragons and some of the other things they were doing in animation was nothing like Rudolph and Frosty.
Gotcha.
So they did these films for ABC, like the Bermuda Depths. The reason Arthur made that in Bermuda was he lived in Bermuda, and he made another film in Bermuda, The Ivory Ape, and the budgets were low for those. So they turned out like these B movies, these cult B movies.
Gotcha.
But he hoped, at the time, that would lead to doing Steven Spielberg type movies eventually. Gotcha. But they didn't quite make it to that last step. Yeah. So that was their goal, and they did a lot of different things to get to that goal, but it didn't actually happen for them. So then, when I came along, see, their last thing that they did was in '87. It was the comic strip with tiger sharks, street frogs, and stuff like that. Now, I didn't know about those shows because I was in college and just getting out of college.
Yeah.
So I didn't reach out to Rankin Bass until '91. So only like 4 or 5 years after they wrapped on their last show.
Yeah.
And at the time when I started dealing with Arthur, he was working on The King and I.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like, oh man, this is going to be a biggie, you know. It didn't quite turn out that way when it was released, and it was released after my first book came out. and
Gotcha.
it was sort of a, I don't know, a lower budget Disney type film, and you know, that was the last hurrah for them. That and Santa Baby.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny that you mentioned like the comic strip, right? Because again, you know, talking what about a game changer it was, right? So a lot of people don't realize the same people that gave us Thundercats are the same people that gave us Rudolph and Frosty.
Right, right, and which is totally different genre-wise, but it's every bit as popular as, you know, the Christmas specials.
Oh
They could make a feature film out of Thundercats, and they've been talking about it for a long time, you know, to remake it in some way.
yeah.
It still has life to
Oh my God.
yeah. So it is strange. One thing though that we should talk about, because I know we don't have a lot of time, is the Rudolph and Santa puppets were auctioned off last year.
Oh my God, for like a ton of money.
After we talked, or
I think it was right around, either right around when we were talking or it was happening right after, but they went for a lot of money. Somebody made a nice chunk of change on that one.
well, they sold for $368,000, and I helped with the catalog,
Yeah.
all the images and everything. So when it sold, I asked them, you know, who bought it, and they couldn't tell me. There was a, you know, in the contract they can't disclose. So, you know, eventually I found out. Well, they went to the Center for Puppetry Arts. Now,
Oh, fantastic.
I went to Dragon Con 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and I did 5 panels, and the people from the Center for Puppetry Arts were at my panels.
Yeah.
You know, there was talk from the fans that they wanted to get the puppets down there and this and that. So they got the puppets, and I worked with Center for Puppetry Arts to license them some photos and give them some of the history and this and that. And then Antiques Roadshow did a new update on the puppets, and they did it on television and on their podcast, Detour.
Yeah.
And I was interviewed for those. But
Gotcha.
nobody wants to say what I discovered last year, that the puppets are not the ones that were actually in the animation.
I think you mentioned some of those, like the photo puppets or something, right?
Right. They're the publicity photo puppets. And they were used for a display that was at NBC at the Rockefeller Plaza in New York at the end of the 60s into the early 70s.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of odd that people don't want to talk about that, because, you know, in today's world, the way news is, that people's attention spans are only for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And if you see a headline, they go to it, read through it a little bit, and get off of it. So they don't want to disclose that fact, because it kind of takes them down a peg.
Gotcha.
And the puppets are in my books.
Yeah.
The last 2 books I wrote, The Making of Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and the Frosty the Snowman scrapbook, you could clearly see, if you look at the puppets that were in Japan, that the Santa puppet is the one in the animation, because the beard is shorter, and there's these lines on the sides of the mouth that are decaying. And you could tell in the show, when you watch it, his beard moves a little when he talks. And I know for a fact the one that Tad Moshinaga in Japan hung on to is the one that was in the animation. That's how I figured it out.
And he still has that one over there?
Well, his family does. He passed away years ago, and they had an exhibit of Tad Moshinaga's career, and that Santa, and there was a Mrs. Claus's head in the display too. So most of the puppets stayed in Japan. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of the animators and the people that created the puppets hung on to them.
Yeah.
So it will show up in time. The actual puppets from, there might be a Charlie in the Box or a Hermey or whatever in Japan.
Someone's holiday decorations, right? Passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
So, the one thing I do want to ask you, and I know we're getting close to wrapping up here. So, we were talking about like these holiday specials, and, you mentioned Charlie Brown and the Grinch. And I think Charlie Brown is owned by like Apple TV now, Grinch. I actually picked up a copy of the DVD for a decent price the other day. So I watched it. I haven't seen them I don't know if that was on. And like Rudolph and Frosty are still on.
Right.
Obviously there's the appeal of the Rudolph and Frosty. And again, I don't know if Santa Claus is Coming to Town is on still.
Yeah.
I think Freeform does their 25 Days of Christmas, right? What do you think? And I guess this is just our society where we are now. Like here we are, the week of Christmas. And growing up, any night of the week, this week, you would put on the TV, and it would be one of the many Rankin Bass specials, or it'd be a Muppet Christmas special, or a Hanna-Barbera Christmas special, or Garfield, or Bugs Bunny, or whomever. Like, where do you think that's all gone?
Well, I told you earlier, I think off of the show, that I've been busy like no other right now.
Yeah.
It seems like each year I get busier and busier. And I think this year in particular was a very bad year for our country and a very good year for people going back to their childhood and remembering what it was like.
Yeah.
Which it's not like that anymore, which is scary. But the Rankin Bass specials written by Romeo Muller have heart and warmth and a quality that makes you reflect back to when, you were with your family around the television, the one time a year that it would show. And there's nothing like that. I'm as big a fan for A Charlie Brown Christmas and How the Grinch Stole Christmas as anybody. In fact, I reached out to everybody that worked on those shows as I was doing my Rankin Bass work. And those have the same qualities that the Rankin Bass specials have. So they will stand the test of time, even though they did a lot of network changing and company changes. These things are just going to go on forever. And no matter what is happening in our society or the world, people still want to go back to them. You can watch Rudolph, hundreds of times and still get something out of it. And the same goes with all the Rankin Bass specials, The Year Without a Santa Claus. And I know you watch them in order or
I do. I do.
And you post about them and things. And so you like to chronicle the specials and every year go back to them in the same way. And everybody likes to do that.
Yeah.
It just seems like I'm getting busier and busier because people just appreciate the Rankin Bass specials like no other. There's this magic to them. I think they use the right word, animagic, for their stop motion. The magic part of it you can't really explain. It's just too hard. I look at it as an artist, and I like the way it looks. And that's what draws me in. When I see some of the modern day animation, like for the new feature films that are coming out, I look at it and it just doesn't do anything for me. So I'm not even going to get into it. I don't want to watch it and criticize it and all of this because it doesn't appeal to me in the way that the Rankin Bass shows do. I just love the look of the shows, period. But then when you watch them, you can see they have great stories, great songs by Maury Laws. Just they got everything going for them, you know.
And you know, you mentioned him earlier, Paul Cocker Jr. You know, like, and especially like Frosty really was where it kind of like took off with him, essentially, right?
Right.
And then you just saw that style carry over, going all the way through, like you know, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, Frosty, The Stingiest Man in Town. Like they all had that look to them, so you knew exactly what it is you're watching. Like I don't know if you're a South Park fan, but they did the one episode about Mr. Hanky, the Christmas Pooh, and essentially they just retold "Twas the Night Before Christmas," and they do all the songs and stuff. And there's one frame where the characters turn into like with the teeth and like the way the faces look, and it's just like for so many people that style, the Rankin Bass shows, you know, meant something to people.
Well, it's funny. Paul Coker Jr. is a guy that I love. He's 92 now. He just signed a bunch of cards for me to put on my sites, and I just love that guy because he doesn't really acknowledge that these things are so iconic.
Yeah,
he's very modest, and he came along at a time when Arthur Rankin, I think, wanted to do something as good as Disney, but he didn't want to copy Disney.
Yeah.
So Frosty became their look, even though it was Paul Coker Jr.'s look and style. Yeah. That became the look of the Rankin Bass shows. And you're right, everything that followed, you can tell it's Rankin Bass animation like that, you know. Even though he also designed Santa Claus is Coming to Town and all of the other even Animagic things, the cell animation looks so distinct. It's definitely Rankin Bass, and it's definitely Paul Jr. So he means a lot to the enchanted world of Rankin Bass, and a lot to pop culture.
Absolutely.
Designing Heatmiser and Snowmiser, those characters are so big and so iconic. They're like Mickey Mouse, you know.
Yeah. So, and everybody knows that song, right?
I tell people when I do my events and I appear at conventions, Comic Cons, and things like that.
Yeah.
I have the mask and different things on my, and it doesn't matter if they can't speak English, they came from Puerto Rico or wherever, they will know the Heatmiser and Snowmiser. They'll point them out and they'll say Heatmiser, Snowmiser, yeah. And like, they don't look at Rudolph or Frosty or any of them, but they know the Heatmiser and Snowmiser.
And you know, the one other thing before we go to, I just want to ask you too, you know, you mentioned it before, you see some of the new things and it just doesn't, you know, equate to it. Like, and I'll use the perfect example of the Grinch. You know, like I said, I just watched the original Chuck Jones, Boris Karloff one with June Foray. Ironically enough, right?
Right.
You know, they made the live action one with Jim Carrey. They made the animated one that's with Benedict Cumberbatch looks great, but you know, like neither one of those can equate to what that original one is like. With the Rankin Bass ones, and again, I'm sure in the world of Hollywood, people have reached out to maybe you or to any other people thinking like, hey, could we do a Rudolph film? Like, could do Hermey the Elf on the big screen? You know, could that be a possibility, or do you think just leave well enough alone?
Well, I've heard from some pretty big producers over the years. You know, they wanted to do Rudolph like Babe.
Okay.
They wanted to do the Mad Monster Party as a live action movie. All different things. And you know what? I'm I would be dead set against them.
Mhm.
In fact, what's his name? Jon Favreau bought the rights to The Year Without a Santa Claus.
Did he?
And, you know, he did Elf, and he based the Elf costumes off of Rudolph. And eventually he wants to make The Year Without a Santa Claus in some way. But I think all of it is a bad idea because you cannot remake something that's already great.
Yeah.
That everybody loves. It's such a part of everyone's life.
Absolutely.
And make it better. It never happens. I can't even think of one instance that's happened and it's worked. But in the same regards, it's good when they remake stuff because then that brings attention to the original thing and it makes you love it even more. So obviously, I'd probably be selling more books if they remade The Year Without a Santa Claus and put it in the movies and it bombed. And everybody's watching the Rankin Bass one again on streaming and all that. So it's all good. It doesn't never works. That's the problem with that.
Yeah. So and I'll quickly plug for you now too. So you mentioned you have books, you have signed cards, like on miserbrothers.com. And I mean,
and I have an Etsy shop too that's been popping like popcorn these days. It's under Miser Bros. That's the shop name. Miser Bros, like the Heatmiser and Snowmiser. So yeah, you can find me on the internet. I have a blog that I post a lot of things. I'm on Instagram with you, Facebook, everywhere. There's even some fraudulent Facebook groups that our attorneys are keeping an eye on. Like there's one called Rankin Bass Enterprises that's actually stealing my photos and taking copyright out of them. So financially, we're going to be rewarded for the misdeeds of others. But you know, there's bad things going on where people pirate and do some crazy things on the internet. But for the most part, it's all good. And like I said, I've been busier than ever this year, and having a lot of fun with it. So.
Yeah. And Mel had a question. Do you know anything about getting a Rudolph on 4K with improved sound and picture? The French version on Rudolph Blu-ray sounds better than English, he says.
I can tell you this with all certainty. All the versions of Rudolph, both Blu-ray and DVD, are bad versions.
Okay, there you go.
They haven't been done right. In fact, I was hired in 2019 by the guy who was doing the supplemental material for Rudolph and the others, and Universal botched it. They got people involved that shouldn't have been involved. In fact, people that do not own the rights to, but they believe they own the rights. And Rudolph in particular has been the worst one. Jeez. That's why I'm not on the bonus features for the 2019 editions, because they decided to just do whatever they wanted to do, just a cash grab. And they did. We have the original ending in color, ready to be remastered, ready to be, and they don't care. The original end credits in color with the elf throwing the packages off with the credits and everything. That should be on the Blu-ray. That's not on the Blu-ray. And there's all kinds of errors. In fact, I bought the little drummer boy one, and in the middle of scenes, it was fading to black on the Blu-ray. So I didn't even want a reference copy for myself. I returned it to Amazon because it was so bad. And then they put out the Here Comes Peter Cottontail, and they put out the 44-minute edited version that they were showing on the WB.
Oh my gosh.
Missing all kinds of scenes and songs and everything. So they're horrible. And until I get involved with it fully, there isn't going to be a good Rudolph Blu-ray and DVD. I can tell you that right now. So don't even buy those. They're not worth buying at all. They're horrible.
Watch it on CBS. Well, but you can't even watch it on CBS.
No.
Because those are like edited and chopped up and like they're doing the what the heck was the song? I think we talked about this last year.
We're a couple of misfits.
Oh my God, it's a hot mess.
And it's just jumping and it's showing the animation from Fame and Fortune.
Yes.
They're singing and it's like, what is going on? But it's been like that for years.
Yeah.
And I posted on my blog and everywhere else. And then you get people that take my information from my post and my book, and then they go on YouTube and make a video. Here's all the things that are wrong with Rudolph. You see those pop up everywhere from what I've been saying
for years.
It never gets done right. And I always say Rudolph is the closest thing to the Wizard of Oz, the original Wizard of Oz, the MGM movie that they put out 10 different times on Blu-ray, and it's so iconic. Rudolph is every bit as iconic, but has not got the same treatment at all. Not on Blu-ray, not on television, not anywhere. Jeez. So hopefully, eventually, one day, it'll be done right.
There's always tomorrow, right?
Right. Exactly.
And that would be a dream come true.
Right.
Well, there you go.
And it can be done. I can see that it gets done, but when you get these bad people involved with the project, then it goes bad fast.
Yeah, they don't know they don't know the source material. They don't have the passion for it. Like you said, it's the quick dollar signs. How can we catch it on
cash grab? There's a lot of cash grabbing going on these days.
Yeah.
So I've never cared about cash grabbing. Like I would not want to take something so heartwarming and family oriented and try to cash grab on it. It's just, it doesn't interest me. So we'll see. Maybe one day, like you said, there's always tomorrow.
Well, Rick, let me tell you, it was a lot of fun again talking. I mean, this could be our new holiday tradition, always having you on here. It was great talking about this stuff. I mean, and again, I love this stuff. You love this stuff. People watching tonight, people want merch. They want all this stuff. And folks, if you want merch, get the merch from Rick's website, Miser Bros, and the Etsy page. You can get the books. You can get the autographs, and you're doing the convention scene. Hopefully more of those will be coming up if things go well in our world today. But this was a ton of fun again. Talking about this stuff. I love these cartoons.
Well, thanks for having me, and Merry Christmas, and we'll be talking soon.
Absolutely. So everybody at home, again, thank you to Rick, and folks, we will see you next time on IncrediChat. It'll be in the new year, but have a great Christmas, have a great New Year. Rick, thank you so much again.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.